Okay, continuing with the book of Primitus, Empyria lecture series number 2, part 3, titled New Frontiers. Where we left off, of course, death is now a part of the world because of the Shadowfall, because of man's impurity. And now that death has entered the world, there's now people who've been taken to the Rift Plains, and they're going to start civilizations there. And now people have also returned to Ardon. And then there's a new world that was created for a very specific reason, actually, tied to the prophecy, which we won't even talk about the prophecy next until Book 5, the Book of Netza. But moving on. This part 3 is the last little part of the Primitus Age. The part of the Primitus Age post-death entering the world. And the reason why the Primitus Age is still called that, even after death enters the world, we'll get into. So, these are the records of the people. Also, this might be my shortest video so far. It definitely will be. So, for people who don't like long videos, this is good. The problem is, you would have to have listened to or watched the videos before this to understand what's going on here. Anyway, these are the records of the people who were taken by the angels to the Rift Plains. Adam and his wife, Eva, were taken to the Rift Plain, Enox. Remember? Spoke about this just last video. But Adam and Eva are like an Easter egg to the Adam and Eve of our world. And they were taken to Enox. So they were on Ardon originally. Then the rapture happened before the Shadowfall. They were taken up to the Rift Plain Enox. And then on Enox, they discovered Enox's original rift gate that got him there when he discovered the Rift Plain. They go through it, and Toniel uses that rift portal and guides them through it to land on the new Earth, Gaian. So Adam and Eva will populate that new planet. Anyway, many of the elves, as well as some of the Vienna, were also taken to Enox. And the elves who were taken to Enox began to build a great city in the forest. They called the city Genshur. Genshur is... sorry. So, this Ahana city, the tree of Ahana, the Ahana tree, the capital of the land of Evenhara on Ardon, is the capital of the elves on Ardon. However, the capital of the elves among the Rift Plains, among all of them, becomes this city, Genshur. So I drew this back in my second year at Bible college. So 2020, like November 2020, I drew this. This is, so the Rift Plains eventually, instead of having countries and nations, they do have nations and stuff like this, but instead of having big continents and countries, they section off portions of the Rift Plains into provinces. So every Rift Plain, there's different provinces, and they're called provinces instead of being called countries, just to distinguish Rift Plains from planets or from the Earth, Ardon. So here, I just included this here. Ignore these. So these don't come until Book 11, so thousands of years later. This city won't come until Book 5, and this city until the end of Book 5. We'll get into that. So you can't see this, but it says Ephraim, Ephraine. And Genshur was built in this big forest here, right near the coast of this river. So the province that this eventually becomes in the future, not yet. People just landed here. They haven't landed. People just arrived via the rapture of the angels. Just arrived here and begin rebuilding their own civilizations here. But eventually in the future, this becomes the province, this whole little landmass. This is river, water and stuff. This province is named Ovesh. Not yet though. But that's why it's there for now. So, They call the city Gentur, and that city is right there. Alright. Now we're going to talk about, well, I'm going to showcase where all the raptured people were taken to in Aresta. So, of course, after before the Shadowfall, the people who believed what Aegir was saying and purified themselves, they were given a mark of purity on their skin, and when the time came that night, their angels raptured all those people with the mark of purity, and they were scattered across the rift plains. So that's how the rift plains get people on them, before the technology exists of airships and rifter ships and all that kind of stuff, and planes. They're taken to the rift plains of Aresta. Where was I going with that? Oh yeah. So let's look at the AI art generated images that I made to best showcase what the rift plains look like. And if you recall, in Arcane's creation video number 1, well, lecture series number 1, not the introduction video. In Arcane's creation, I showed images of all the rift plains, but now we have names for all of them. All right, except one, which I guess I'll give the name later. So there was one rift plane that nobody was taken to by the angels, and it's discovered later. All right, this is Enox. So this province of Ovesh is in the world of Enox. Adam, Eva, and their followers were taken here, along with all the elves. All the elves are taken here, because all the elves had kept their purity. So they were given a mark immediately. Aegir didn't go and preach to the elves to warn of the coming destruction. So, along with the fairies, which we'll see, the fairies, basically the elves and all their subraces, they were all fine. It's really just the humans who screwed up and became impure. So this is kind of what the world looks like of Enox. It's the most Earth-like, so to speak. All right. Eltashor and Mizeren were taken to the Rift Plain, Belsh. This image, I think I said this in Arcane's creation video, but unfortunately I could not get stable diffusion to generate an accurate image of this world. It's a swampy land, so it got that right. It's swampy. The problem is, instead of these things being here, it should be a land of like plateaus with basins of water, and the basins have marshlands in them. So there's that. Next is Altia, one of my favorites. Riven and Izara were taken to Altia. Altia is, of course, there's no sun or moon in the skies of Rift Plains because they're not planets. The skies of Rift Plains, they turn bright, so the Rift Portal energy that makes up the energy that makes up the sky, the particles of that Rift energy, they glow really bright gold. When they glow bright gold, it turns the sky below them blue, and that makes it daytime. And then at the nighttime cycle, the particles in the Rift Portal kind of get duller, like a little less bright, and then it makes the sky black. So it's they're day-night cycles, and what makes it? How do the Rift Plains know? They're not sentient, but how do they quote unquote know when to turn daytime and when to turn nighttime? It's based on the day-night cycle of Ardon, the original Earth. So all the continents of Ardon, which we'll see at the end of this video, all the continents of Ardon, the Earth, are a little bit small, not too small, but close together enough that the island that is in the middle of the continents, in the middle of the ocean, is like dead center. When the sun is directly above dead center, the space where all the continents fit on one half of the planet. So the other half of the planet is all ocean, which of course is where the mermaids probably build tons of ginormous cities underwater. And eventually they call the world of the mermaids, like the other half of the planet under the ocean, they call it Neptunia later on when they discover more about them. But for now, let's just keep. Let me stay on track and not talk about the mermaids. um, what was I saying? Yeah. So the original Earth, Ardon, all the continents fit on one half of the planet. So whenever it is daytime in the center of the island in the center of the, we'll see the map later. When it's daytime for pretty much all of the continents, except for like a little offset time zone difference on the edges of the continents. But when it's daytime for all the continents, it's daytime for all the rift planes at the same time. So that's how the whole universe can keep the same calendar and the same day and time and all that kind of stuff throughout all human history. Anyway, so Riven and Izara were taken to Eltia. Janir and Lemita were taken to Nora. And just reminder, this was one of the harder ones to get to generate correctly, along with a couple others. Because Nora, it got the ocean right. It got the fact that there's a floating continent right, but it should be a little bit higher up. And there should be crystals here, rift crystals. And there should be bigger. And there should be pine trees and less mountains. So Nora is it's a world of very large continents, like supercontinents. But they're all floating. Moving on. Goa and Nola and their sons and daughters were taken to Fiara. Fiara is a world of vast grasslands, hills. There's not really mountains, so these shouldn't be here. But I did include in the prompt the fact that the world is very rich with caverns and rift crystal and mines and stuff. The problem is that the image put them on top of the land. They should be under the ground. So just imagine this. Don't imagine this. This. And not these in the back, because it's not a mountainous world. It's very flat and hilly and rolling hills and beautiful green, blue sky, kind of like the Microsoft Windows background, Microsoft Windows Vista, if anyone knows what I'm talking about. That's Fiara. And you can imagine, because it does happen in the future ages, Fiara becomes a world where a lot of huge cities are built on. Anyway. Anza and Ivana were taken to the tropical world of archipelagos called Quran. Quran is one of my favorites too. But moving on. Oban and Unea were taken to Tulrak. I just don't like that Stable Diffusion didn't know what I meant. Apparently it doesn't know how to make oceans of tar. I guess it tried by making water black water, but it's not water, it's supposed to be tar. Like this is water texture, not tar. It should be this, but that. So Turlock is a very strange world, as you can see. In the future, it's mostly tribal people who live here, like dark skin, it's kind of like African vibes. In the future, when people inhabit it more and build more civilization. Well, very little civilization in this world. Okay, Tuvan and Alna were taken to Myra. Pretty straightforward. However, what should be included here is like this world also has like picture sand dunes like deserts, but instead of sand, it's snow. So they have like snow dune deserts in Myra. And instead of cacti protruding from the sands, they have ice-shaped cacti, like icicles protruding from the snow deserts. Like that would be here. I couldn't get the AI art to generate that for some reason. It was very difficult. Alright, and see, I put in the negative prompt, so the prompt that says don't generate this, I always put sun, but it still has like a a point of light that's emanating light. I guess it's impossible to get it to do that. To not do that, I mean. In reality, rift planes, the light comes from the sky itself, like all the sky. So the whole sky dims and brightens with the passage of time. It doesn't have a light source that gives light to it, like a planet does. Alright. Mushaf and Panira were taken to the rift plane Druvex. Pretty straightforward. If you've seen Star Wars 3, with the planet Mustafar, the end of the episode 3. That's pretty much exactly what Druvex is. It looks exactly like that. Except, as you can see here, there's more like habitable sections of the world of Druvex that people can live in. It's not all like this. But also another light source. You can tell the image wants there to be a sun here, but there shouldn't be. Fener and Goma were taken to Central. Now, this one's pretty accurate. Only problem is the mushrooms are more like they aren't actual mushrooms. They have tree trunks. It's just at the top of the tree, it's a mushroom. Like this. Yeah, like that. And obviously, the AI wanted to have real trees so badly. See, that shouldn't be there. But other than that, and also there should be more like blue grass. No pun intended. I mean literal blue grass. Blue and cyan and purple grasses there should be. And some green. And there are more green vegetation. There is more green vegetation sparsed out throughout the world of Central. But this is good enough for AI. Moving on. This is my ultimate favorite Rift Plane. This is the world I would live in if I could live in my universe, if it was real. I would live in Pyra. So Zeoa and Rin were taken to Pyra. This is my favorite type of landscape. This is where I would live, and I would live in Pyra. Moving on. Also, Pyra is named as such because Zeoa and Rin, when they were taken here, their first daughter was Pyra. They cherished her, so they named the world after their daughter, Pyra. Just a side note there. Not mentioned in the book, but, happened. Okay, so, as I said before, the sub races of the elves and the elves were taken to the Rift Plains. None of them died in the shadows in the Shadowfall. However, of course, they will still die of age, just much longer lifespans for them. They're blessed. But the fairies, all of the fairies, were taken to Kaliska. And this is important to... not super important, but... this connects to later in my book, in Book 7, The Fall of Castor. So, a bit distance to cover before we get there. But this character here, Lacridoria, is one of the fairies who was taken to Kaliska, of course. All of the fairies were taken, so she was there. And there's a huge lake on Kaliska. Huge lake. And Lacridoria would soak in the Gaia of that lake. Because Kaliska is one of the Rift Plains. When Eula created Arvesta and the Rift Plains, Eula created Kaliska with much more Gaia energy in the land and the water of this world than all the other Rift Plains. So, Lacridoria, a very wise fairy, would soak in that Gaia, and it makes her really powerful and gives her special powers. She becomes kind of like this mythical figure later on. Of course, she's a real figure in the world, but she has like this mythic quality to her, and her presence, and her name. And she's called, eventually, she becomes so well known and so mythic and legendary to the people, even the fairies themselves, of Kaliska, that Lacridoria eventually is just referred to as the fairy of the lake, because she hides in the lake. So anyway, this is Kaliska. The fairies and Lacridoria were taken there. Sino and Amalia and Sedis and Tuliana were taken to Hemora. Hemora is basically like this. Desert plateaus, except more fantastical structuring of rocks and stuff. Like more alien-looking rock structures. But yeah, that's pretty much it. So, after the Shadowfall was over, many people, including the elves and Vienna, built rift gates to return to Ardon. And most of the fairies also returned to Ardon to live in the marshlands of Evenhara, where they were created. So yeah, people were taken to all these rift plains, but they also wanted to return to what they knew their whole lives. And most of them had been alive on Ardon, because there was no death yet, for a couple thousand years, 1,000 to 2,000 years. So being that old and living that long with your home, you get attached, obviously. So they returned to Ardon, and yeah. Now we're gonna get back to King Zerafox's son, Akenna. So King Zerafox's son, Akenna, he was left to slumber in the palace basement so that he survived the Shadowfall. After awakening years later as a grown adult, he shortly became the second king of Ultira. So after people returned to Ardon, and enough people returned to Ultira for there to be a kingdom again, Akenna became the second king of that revived kingdom of Ultira. Akenna then had a son named Reliborn. Typo. It's alright. It's not Relibron, it's Reliborn. The O and the R should be flipped. It's alright. Typos happen. Akenna had a son named Reliborn, who became the third king of Ultira. And Reliborn, there we go. Then Reliborn and Jaesar had their son, Rakaza. So I'm going to go back to the timeline really quick. Oh, I think it's earlier. Oh, yeah. So, look at the timeline. King Rakaza. I mentioned him back in the very first video, the introduction video. So this is why he's mentioned in the book, in his genealogies. Moving on. Back to business. Whoops. Okay, so they have a son named King Rakaza. King Rakaza is the last king of Ultira who lives during the Primitus Age. We'll see why. Well, he's the last king to reign during the Primitus Age. Now, by this point in history, there's still only one kingdom with one monarchy, and that's Ultira. It is the sole kingdom with a king and a queen that exists in all the worlds by this time in history. Anyway, so King Rakaza has a son and a daughter. His son is Salaziel. His daughter is Olivia. Now, during the reign of King Rakaza, people began building ships and exploring the seas. So Medela, who invented the ship back in the beginning of the Primitus Age, her blueprint, her model, has now been fully perfected, and now people are able to sail much longer distances on the sea and in the open ocean where it's much more rough terrain. They've now built durable ships. And an island was discovered in the middle of the sea. I'll show you the map of that, and I'll show you what I mean by middle of the sea, which was between the two continents. Now Rakaza begot Salaziel and Olivia. Olivia was 20 years old, and she was given authority over the island, and she called the island Kalia. So that's what this is supposed to represent, the first settlement on Kalia. Where was I? Okay. The people of Kalia multiplied, and they became well known for their skills in fishing and swimming. After Princess Olivia began her rule, people began exploring the western seas, and they soon came to discover the western continent. Now, so you'll notice these names, they were taken to the Rift Plain Hemora, but they also returned to Ardon along with other people. And they wanted to see the rest of Ardon too. So Cetus and his partner, Sino, came to the new land, and they claimed it as their own. So they were part of the expeditions of people who go on ships from Kalia to the western continent to discover what's there. They claimed it as their own because they were the first to discover the western continent. They were the first to discover the western continent. There we go. Enunciate, please. Cetus claimed the southern section of the continent, and Sino claimed the northern section of the continent. Therefore, these lands are now called Sedima and Sinoa. Sino took his wife and his people, and they settled in the land of Sinoa. Cetus also settled in the land of Sedima with all his followers. Alright, next. In the land of Anurek, there was a man named Argus, a famous explorer. Argus began exploring the northern seas, and he discovered another new continent. He claimed the land and called it Serea, after the name of his daughter, similar to Zeoa and Rin with Pyra. Argus and his daughter, same thing. So Argus and his wife settled in the land of Serea, and they made thick coats and lived in heated homes. Not heated homes with like our technology, of course. Natural heat, fire. For the land was cold, and it always snowed. So the land of Serea also grew in population. Now all the lands of Ardon were filled. So now we have all these new lands of Ardon discovered. The Rift Plains all inhabited by people, except one Rift Plain, which is called Zed. We'll get into that later. I don't know when later yet, but it's not important for now. So we have 13 out of the 14 Rift Plains inhabited by people, and we have all the lands of Ardon inhabited by people, and named, all the lands named, and we have the Gaian, the second Earth, being filled with people as well. So all the worlds that exist for humanity in the universe are now populated by people, or now have people in them. Not fully populated yet, but this is what Serea kind of looks like. This is more what Sedima would look like. Sanoa a little different. Actually, I think I forgot to add. The images for Sedima and Sanoa. Oh well. So here we go. This is the full map. I've been using a cropped version of it up until now of just this continent. But now we have the full map. Well, it is cut off. It's, whatever. But I also have another image. This is the original image. This is the original drawing I made for Ardon. The first ever drawing I made for Ardon when I first made up what it looked like. I had the names of places in my head a long time before this, but in 10th grade in high school, I, for the first time, tried drawing what the map should look like. All I knew was, at the time, okay, there's a river here that separates Evenhara from Emek and Verdal, at the time called Paesha. And there should be Ultira surrounded by mountains. There should be a snowy continent. There should be the western continent and then islands. And I just drew it as it came to me naturally. Anyway, so we have Emek. Mankind was created here. We have Verdal. We have the Luna Peninsula. We have Evenhara, the land of the elves. We have Safoa, a smaller island. We have Grunera, the mountains of Grunera. We have the Ensu region, the Ensu River and the Ensu Forest. We have Ultira. We have Anarek in the north. We have Serea, not Panerva. I changed it to Serea after high school. Serea, the Icy. We have Kalia, so Princess Olivia is given authority over this island. And then from there, they built more ships, and they went this way. And Sedis and Sino and their wives, they come here, and one of their fellow explorers named Hannah is the one whom this river was named after, so it's called the Hanas River now. Sino went north, discovered this land, Sinoa. Sedis went south, discovered the rest of the land, Sedima. And then we have the capitals that come later in history, a little bit later. The capital of Sedima becomes Eshfala. The capital of Sinoa is Phasalia. We'll get into that very soon. The capital of Serea was originally over here, named Thores, and then it eventually becomes Hesbon in Book 6 of the Legendary Scrolls. The Fall of Calvus. We'll get into that. Where Gogma's palace was. We have the capital of Anarek later on in history is Hythera. And then there's Beshthaba, Teravan. These will be mentioned in Book 6. We have Marissa, Book 8, Visca, Book 8. The capital of Grunera here is called Thasher. There's Mount Aranchuron, where Valentina was given the vision of the creation at the start of humanity. We have Elvok, later becomes New Elvok in Book 8. We have Nevai, an elven city. Over here, I forgot what I put that there for back in high school. We have, of course, a great Ahana tree, Ahana City. Uh, we have the birthplace of man. And then there's eventually a city built here in the waterfall in the Elven City called Cataracte Urbe. Um, Whew. So, there we have it. Now I also have a map I made in World Painter, which is a software program used to create your own maps in the game called Minecraft. So I actually made, not to scale, that's impossible, because all of this fits on one half of a planet. This is like one half of a planet. This is a bit. This is like the full. So here you see it's cut off. Here it's not cut off, so you can see the full shape. So we're gonna get into a couple things. This here represents a giant, unique, massive land called the Sand Sea. There shouldn't be water here. I did this for the functionality of the Sand Sea in Minecraft, the game. So that's why it's blue. It's not water. In my universe, it's not water. It's sand. It looks like sand on the map. But we'll get into what the Sand Sea is all the way in Book 8, The Rise of Pollux. Anyway, we have the land of Sedima here, separated by the Hanas River. And there's like a city that's eventually built here with a gate and everything. And it serves as the border town between Sanoa and Sedima. So Sanoa isn't just all desert. It's plateaus, and there's like savanna trees here, acacia trees. There's red desert, mesa. There's a lake. There's more oases over here too. So Sanoa is much more verdant than Sedima. Sedima is just your typical desert dunes with some desert mountains in the south. We have Kalia here. Very beautiful tropical island with archipelagos to the north. We have Serea. This green stuff is just... it was for the software program to recognize something, like a brush or something. But it shouldn't be green. It's all snowy and stuff. And tall pine trees and taiga forests. This represents frozen water. So the ice sea is right here. As you can see. This is the land of Anarek. Gogma's palace would have been around here. Ultira here is a big flat plain surrounded by mountains on all sides. Ultira is like the most important kingdom in the whole universe for all history, even into the future. Even after the movies, Ultira is important. Alright? We have the Ensu region, thick forests and stuff. The Ensu River. We have the mountains of Granera. This big mountain here is Arunshuran. Supposed to be. So we have Arunshuran. Whoops. Why is it doing that? Thank you. We have the land of Verdal, with the correct name. See, Anarek, Serea, Verdal. Emek here. In Minecraft, I had to manually, in-game, add the waterfalls here. It's taking so much time. So I kind of give up on it. So just imagine it's blue all around. And then there's a river that feeds into the waterfalls on the sides too, from the Savia River. We have the Luna Peninsula. And we have Ivanhara. The Ahana tree should be built on this giant plain. Not going to do that in Minecraft. I have a life. And I don't have the skill to do that anyway. And we have here the island of Safoa. Which, by the way... During the Primitus age, a temple was built on Safoa to the Esper Ari. So, not a good place, spiritually. Safoa is, not a good spiritual place. Moving on. But it is a very beautiful island. There we have it. That's Ardon. So, just a couple more things to talk about before we finish part 3. And with that, Empyria Lecture Series number 2 in its entirety, the Book of Primitus. These are the genealogies of Dana, the first princess of Sinoa. Faskel, one of Sino's sons and fellow explorers, took Hannah as his wife, and they had one son and 3 daughters. These, their children were, now a lot of this kind of genealogical writing is in all of the Book of Primitus. So you're welcome for skipping all of that. I just summarized what you need to know. Okay, their children were Ramad, Bua, Meze, and Zisa. Ramad and Mina begot Satira, Harold, and William. William and Leola begot Ilis and Ophar. Ophar and Emelina begot Blanca, Helena, and Teth. Teth and Esnella begot Jorian. Jorian and Naomi begot Bryn and Gorgon. Gorgon and Rebecca begot Velafor, Sherel, and Enzio. Enzio and Yanes begot Lerek, Benjamin, and Gorjash. Gorjash and Sierra begot Nathalia and Uzaim. Uzaim and Ethil begot Azura and Razan and Meda begot Dana. So Dana was born to Razan and Meda, and she was the first princess of Sanoa. Dana was the most beautiful woman in all the land, and she was worshipped by men. So, why was this included? One, because there used to be a story to Dana, and I took it out because it was unnecessary. I just kept her genealogy because it still gives historical information. That's pretty much it. And but also it serves the motif of the theme of Dana is she becomes literally worshipped by men because of her beauty. So it still shows that impurity still has a lasting impact in humanity. Just not to the same extent anymore, thankfully. So yeah, Phasalia, the capital, named after Faskel. Princess Dana is the first princess, so the first person to rule over Phasalia as a monarch. This is where Phasalia is. This is a plateau in the Savannah region. Right on top of it is where Phasalia is. And also, what it should be noted is that Princess Dana is the first monarch in all the worlds to exist after the King of Volterra. So that's Princess Dana of Phasalia in the land of Sanoa. Alright, now, I believe this is the last slide. Nope, don't look at that yet. Now King Rakaza of Volterra had grown old, and he said, as he's dying, "Let my death signify the end of this age, for death was not in the world, but now is, and my fathers have passed on." So the day came when Rakaza died, while he slept in his bed. After Rakaza's death, his son Salaziel became the next king of Volterra, so the 5th official king of Volterra, and he reigned over the land with justice. During the first years of King Salaziel's rule, the word went out to all the lands that Auden and Adia had died, and all their offspring with them. So a memorial stone was built in the center of the land of Emek, which today is in the city called Auden Sia. Literally means the city of Auden. The end of the Primitus age had come. Alright, that's it for the Primitus age, and that's really it for the Book of Primitus. It's the last sentence of the Book of Primitus, Book 2 of the Legendary Scrolls, officially. So the Primitus age is marked, its end is marked not just by the Shadowfall and not just by people beginning to explore things more. It's marked by the death of Auden and Adia. So when the first man and woman died, that's when humanity marked the end of an age. They marked that as the end of the first age of the world, and now people refer to it as the Primitus age. So, okay. I was honestly pretty impressed with this, how the Stable Diffusion generated this image. This is pretty close to what not exactly what the stone itself looks like, but the size of it, the reverence for it, the people gathered around it, the stone and the engravings on them around it, and the biome, the landscape. It's very much like what I kind of envisioned. This is supposed to be the memorial stone that's built for Auden in the city of Auden Sia. Of course, the city isn't shown, because it's AI art, but the focus is on the memorial stone for Odin. So this is built over where Odin and Adia were created, and it's also where Odin and Adia died. So they actually died in the same spot where they were created. Not mentioned in the scrolls, but it's still what happened. So we have the Odin stone in the land of Emek. We have everybody here. I'm sure if I zoom in, it's going to break the immersion because they're probably wearing, no one's wearing a t-shirt. No one's wearing modern clothes in this time. Anyway. To finish this video, let us recap everything that's happened. Arcane and Eula created Empyria, leaving it in charge of the four precursors, Toniel, Kaifin, Argosax, and Rekias. And they created Odin and Adia in their image in the land of Emek on the planet Ardon, known as Earth at the time. Odin and Adia have many sons and daughters, and they have sons and daughters, and this genealogy is given, and so many people pioneer things and create music, and they invent things, and they invent astronomy. They explore the lands of the eastern continent of Ardon throughout the Primitus age. At some point, humanity, around here maybe, humanity becomes impure because of the influence of the spirit of the seventh Esper, the forbidden Esper, Ari. And then, because of that, once Odin breaks his covenant with Adia, commits adultery, Toniel decides to judge the whole world for that. And Odin and Adia became marked as pure ones. It's not mentioned in the text, but it's implied. They survived because they were taken and then they returned to Ardon. The rapture happens. Angelus, the Esper of light and justice, sends his angels to rapture the pure ones from the earth. They're taken to the rift plains. The rift plains become inhabited. The Shadowfall happens. Death is now in the world. People don't live forever anymore. And eventually people start exploring more of Ardon once they return to Ardon. And with the death of King Rakaza, and then the subsequent death of Odin and Adia during the first years of the reign of his son, King Salziel, the Primitus age is officially brought to an end, and that happens in the year 2832 AC. So, by this moment, when people are gathered around the Odin stone in Odin Sia, his memorial stone, with the end of the Primitus age, from Book 1, with the creation, to the end of Book 2, we've now covered 2,832 years of history of my universe. And with that, I bring this video and number 2 of the lecture series to an end. I will see you in the next slide for the Legendary Scrolls, Book 3, The Workings of Sintha, which is not a narrative story, it's not a story, but the writings of the book were written down in 3024 AC. So a few hundred years after the end of the Primitus age is when we will pick up next. Alright, see you then.